Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Doing?
It's not even quite afternoon. See? Morning. That was a trick question. So thank you all again for being able to join us. I'm really excited to be able to sit down with these esteemed folks who I am also have had the privilege to know. Many of them, some more deeply than others, but really excited to be able to kind of talk about this subject that touches some of my experience and that is near and dear to my heart. So one of the things that we know, especially in this moment, Congo has been in the news a lot. For those of us who are folks who have been in DC, we've kind of seen the wave of Congo being in vogue and out of vogue. And right now, this seems to be Congo's moment with everyone talking about critical minerals and also things that are happening around the world when we talk about sustainability, human rights, politics, and just the ever-changing kind of landscape. And so I'm here with our esteemed panelists who are going to talk a little bit more about what the changing landscape of advocacy has been looking like in terms of how we've been advocating for Congo from the early 90s into the 2000s and now in the ever-changing landscape of tech. And so with me, I have three amazing people. So I'm going to start here with Bibi Ndala. Bibi is a public health leader in New York City. She's also the New York City coordinator for Friends of the Congo. And she is the co-founder of ILACA, which is an organization that is based in Eastern Congo and is primarily focused on maternal and newborn health in Eastern Congo and throughout the rest of the DRC. We also have Muyisa Kasomo, who is right now not just a budding, but one of the esteemed voices that we have in terms of the social media space talking about Congo and also other affairs that are happening between Congo and the diaspora. Shameless plug, she's my younger sister, so not only do I happen to think that she's one of the best creators and influencers on the market, but have seen her from the beginning. And so Muyisa has been able to create a platform on TikTok and across other social media platforms like Instagram, where she has amplified diaspora voices and has inspired global conversations about what's been happening in Congo and abroad. And last but certainly not least, we have Nils Kinuani, who is a federal policy manager at African Communities Together. And he's also a community leader here in Washington, D.C., where he advocates for immigrant rights and connects grassroots work to federal policy. And so he's also one of the co-founders of Action for Congo and the Diaspora Desk, I'm sorry. So thank you all so much for being here. Super excited about our conversation today. And just for you all to know me, I'm Muyisa Kasomo, one of the co-founders of the Congolese Diaspora Impact Summit. And as someone who has been chronically online and who started her career on Capitol Hill, I'm really just kind of curious to talk to all of them and learn a little bit more about what they've been seeing from the changing landscape from an advocacy perspective. So I'm going to start off with Bibi. So Bibi, you've been very active in diaspora advocacy through the Friends of the Congo and also through your work in public health. Now, looking back, when it comes to the Congolese diaspora and advocacy work that you've been involved in, can you talk a little bit about the shift that you've seen from, let's say, the late 90s, the 2000s, into now in the digital age that we're in?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And, I'm happy to be here. But I think my first memories of advocacy really starts with my parents, my dad, right, when they were in the opposition in Congo, and then my family moved to South Africa, where we would witness, it was kind of like really grassroots in essence, where you kind of had to have a network, right? It was like a tight-knit communities where you had someone that has a direct connection to a prominent figure in Congo, where the communication would happen through letters, phone calls, and then those letters would detail like the situation on the ground, the civil war, the unsettled, the human rights abused, and then we would have gatherings in their living room where the information would be shared. And then you would have like Advocate and like elderlies in the communities that would kind of like strategize, and they would lobby like local political, to draft a letter to the UN to kind of like raise awareness on the situation. So it was very like slow moving. It required a lot of efforts and a deep understanding of the situation to do advocacy work, which is something that's, it's unimaginable right now, right? Because of the proximity that we've built. But then gradually, I would say in the late 90s, like I remember like I would see my parents watching a video cassette, and the first one that I ever saw was like of the last soldier that was part of Mobutu's services, where he was like recounting the events that led to his dismiss, and then they were like sharing the information that happened at Kankokolo and all those things. And that's that's how you were kind of getting information that would help you to do your advocacy. And then we slowly went into the era where you were able to take those cassettes and upload them to YouTube. And then with YouTube, you were able to share the information with anyone that had internet access, where you were able to use passive bystander that would be able to absorb the information and become allies to the cause, right? And then slowly that gradually evolved. It's been mostly tech driven. And then we have the Facebook era, where you would be able to host town halls, and people would be able to absorb that information and take those tools, and also, but still restricted, still limited, and do their advocacy within their framework. And then where it really pivots is when you start introducing Instagram, X, Twitter, whatever we call them now. And that really helped build a proximity. But even for me, working with Friends of the Congo, being based in New York, it often felt like, well, I kind of need to be in DC in order to do like outreach and to do some of this advocacy in order to speak to the right people. But then COVID hit, right? And then we were like all in lockdown, and then we were all like forced to use internet, Zoom, and then that really changed the game, because you were able to connect with people in Kinshasa, in Europe, in a very like close proximity, and to really build that alignment. And the communication was no longer delayed, right? You didn't have to write a letter, you were able to build those rapports in real time, share information in real time, and really kind of build your niche. And then it became a tool, because you had all these NGOs, all these organizations that were rallying around other causes, that were kind of like developing these strategies on really how to use social media to do effective advocacy. So we also had to adapt in real time to use it. And now it's like, I can be in New York, you guys can be in DC, we can have someone that's somewhere else in the US, and we can still come together in a meeting and do advocacy with representative in DC. So that's like, it was a slow evolution, and now it's like rapidly growing, and we constantly have to keep up to date. But with that, it also introduces challenges with fact-checking and misinformation, where we also have to now start doing a lot of due diligence to decipher through the information that we're consuming, to make sure that we're fact-checking and that our advocacy are based on truth, the source of truth, in order for us, to remain effective in what we're doing. I'm not sure I answered your question.
Well, thank you for that. So I'm going to pass it off to Nils. So as a federal policy manager at African Communities Together, you've seen firsthand how federal policy impacts the African immigrant community. And how do you ensure that Congolese voices are not only represented, but are prioritized in these broader conversations? And you can kind of draw back on previous moments that we've seen. Obviously, we're in the early days of a new administration, but maybe kind of give us some background on some of the things that you've seen in terms of being able to advocate for immigrants and ensuring that our Congolese community is represented.
Thank you so much, Luko. I also want to thank all the CDIS team, Jim, Laura, thank you for having me. And thank you to all of you who have come here to attend this very important event. I can relate to the theme of this event, Congo in a new era of global competition. Now, when we're talking about competition, most of us see it through the lens of technology, critical minerals, and actually learn a lot from the previous panel. But advocacy is also, there is also competition in advocacy. There's also global competition in advocacy.
Yes,
so now the question is, where is Congo in that competition? And being in DC, there are so many decisions that are made about African countries, and not only African countries, but a lot of the foreign countries. So now the biggest question is, as I said, where is Congo in that global competition here in DC? So what I've noticed over the years, Luko, is that our Congolese advocacy on DRC and some of the decisions that were made here in the US and in DC about the DRC did not involve Congolese voices, right? And I can trace it back to Lumumba. We all know that in the early years of our republic, of the Congo Republic, there were some decisions that were made here in DC that influenced and changed the history of our country. Now, back then, there was no such a group of educated, smart, talented Congolese Americans like we have today. But Congolese voices, again, going back to the 60s, were not there, not present. And now, to some of the recent years, what we have seen is that those decisions that were made about the DRC were mostly driven by grassroots advocacy. By grassroots, I mean the lobbyists, the diplomats, and then Congolese Americans, or just Congolese voices in general, were absent. Now, in 2025, it's really now up to us to decide, are we going to continue to be absent, and or do we want to get involved? I think that's the biggest question that each one of us will need to answer if we truly care about the situation in our country, and we do recognize that decisions that are made here in the US, in DC, can influence the course of action in the DRC. There are two concerns, two actions. We can decide here to list all the bad things that are taking place in Congo. There's a whole list, right? And I think we alluded to some of them in the previous panel. So that's one thing that we can do. And there's nothing wrong with that, because we need to know what's wrong. And we need to do a diagnosis on what is going on, what's wrong, and what can be done. So that's only the first part of the equation. The other part of the equation, what action now can we take? And where is Congo, or where are Congolese people in the global competition of advocacy that I referred to initially? And Luko, our work has really revolved around answering that question. Where are we in that global competition? So I will be happy throughout this conversation to talk about our work, some of the initiatives that we have taken to make sure that what happened 60 years ago, in the early years of our republic, or in the recent years where grassroots lobbyists influenced decisions that were made in Congo, those things, those trends do not happen now. Thank you.
Pass it back. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that. Muyisa, so you grew up in between the Congolese and American cultures, How has that given you a unique perspective on identity and advocacy? And can you tell us a little bit more about how your dual heritage has influenced the way in which you've been approaching diaspora activism through the work that you've been doing on social media versus what you've seen from earlier generations?
Thank you, and I wanted to echo the sentiments of the other panelists. I'm really grateful to be given an opportunity to be on the panel. Balancing between two cultures is always a unique experience, right? I was born and raised here in the United States, and so my whole context and perception of Congo has come from intermediaries, whether it be my parents, whether it be my siblings, whether it be the media and the music that I consume. And so building an identity through a third-party lens is a little difficult. And I got to a point, I think, once I started college, where I really wanted to dig deeper and connect to my culture from my own lens. I started traveling more often, going back home. I started really trying to find my seat at the table. You know, there's that table at every Congolese party where the papas are sitting there all talking about politics. I know we all know that table. And I realized there's a barrier to entry, like there's a barrier for entry here. One, I don't speak the languages, so I had to find a way, I had to create a niche for myself to be able to participate in these conversations. I really like what Neil said about we are in competition for advocacy as well. So much of the conversation has been dictated by so many other people. I think since 1994, the narrative that we've seen has really been drafted and continued on from our neighbors across the border. And that's because they thrived in English, right? So I see now, as sort of Bibi had mentioned, we went from the small grassroots little in our living room talking and trying to make policy to, hey, let's get out in front of things. Let's change the narrative on a large scale. What are the tools that we have at our disposal to make sure that the rest of the world is hearing the Congolese experience from Congolese people, from the Congolese lens, and how do we leverage that? I really have been enjoying seeing Thérèse Kayigwemba, our foreign affairs minister, and seeing how she's leveraging her dual experiences, right? She's had an opportunity to be outside of Congo, and she's had an opportunity to be inside of Congo, and she's using that to propel a new image of Congo, which has helped us on a diplomacy front.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. So Bibi, you have a long-standing background in public health. You've done a lot of work in New York City. You've obviously been very ingrained in the work that you do with Friends of the Congo. And so I'm kind of curious, could you talk to us a little bit about how, lessons from your professional experience and also the work that you've done on the advocacy front? What are some lessons through those experiences that you can apply to the diaspora movements? And what are maybe some tips that you can bring forth to help diaspora movements strengthen their credibility and impact using the lens of your public health experience and the advocacy work that you've done?
Thank you. Like I previously said, I think as a diaspora, like I grew up with, my parents are both from Congo, but from different parts of Congo, and they typically approach things in different ways. So I had all my misconceptions of the understanding of the situation in Congo, but in order to do like effective advocacy, like they said, knowledge is power. Right, so I've had to unlearn some of the misconceptions that I had. So the power is built by the fact that you have to, you have to rigorously, educate yourself. You have to make sure that the information that you're collecting for advocacy are based on evidence, and it has to be applied in a thorough way in order to amplify impact. And I think as Congolese diaspora that are doing advocacy, we owe it to the cause, we owe it to the people back home to self-educate, right? To collect evidence-based information that are based on data that are factual. And we, it's great to carry emotion because a lot of us have had family members that have been impacted by the situation on the ground, but that often crumbles in a room of policy where it's scrutinized. But when you take that emotion and you pair it with data, with evidence-based information, now you have a powerful tool to kind of advocate and do it effectively from the places that we each are. And my other thing is we were talking about there's a lot of competition within the advocacy world, but we also have to understand that the situation in Congo is extremely critical. It's very, very critical. So we have to move with precision. We have to strategize because every decision that we make, the things that we say, the narrative that we decide to drive can all have consequences. So we have to understand this is not so much about us. It's about the assemble as a whole. So it's good to sometimes defer to others. That's why I've been happy to find, I know, like I was telling Jess, I feel like I'm more of a background support person, and I'm happy to do that, to support others when I recognize that, she may be a better fit to move this forward. So we support in that sense.
Thank you. I'm going to kind of piggyback off of that and kick it to Nils. So you both have, this experience doing community organizing, and Nils, as a leader here in the DMV, we often see you going not only just to Capitol Hill, but also going to the offices of local representatives. And so could you kind of talk to us a little about what are some of the challenges and the differences that you see when it comes to organizing for things that you're looking to make an impact at the federal level versus at the local level, so national versus the local level, and maybe talk to us in terms of, for folks who may not know what that looks like from an organizing standpoint, just give us some more insight from that.
Thank you, Loco, for the question. So in my position with African communities together, I have the opportunity to work with other African communities, and I get to see the experience there, the challenges that they're facing, how are they able to navigate the challenges, but where do they find themselves in that global competition. And when I talk about global competition, I'm not talking about specifically about Kagame and his friends. Well, we have so many other communities that are involved in the same work. I'll give you an example. In 2019, and remember, I talked about Grassroots and Grassroots. In 2019, the Liberian community organized themselves around a legislation. Grassroots, no lobbyists. So community members coming together. We know what happened in Liberia. So they went through a vicious cycle of civil war that really ravaged their country. So 2019, they came together and then they petitioned to the members of Congress. And I've seen this firsthand, a petition to the members of Congress, and they were able to get a senator, Jack Reed, from Rhode Island, lead a legislation. It's called ALRIF, the Liberian Refugee Immigration Fairness Act. And that act essentially was intended, actually, gave permanent resident status, green card, to the Liberian immigrants who entered to the US within a certain period of time, right? Grassroots, community members coming together and petitioning to the members of Congress. Now the question is that the Congolese diaspora, our Congolese communities, can we do that? Are we able to do that, right? So that's a question that we need to answer. So involvement at all levels. But we have to take actions. I've come across people who do not believe in advocacy. I don't blame them, right? I think I grew up. I was born, raised in Congo, And I don't think advocacy in Congo has really changed anything in the course of action in our country. So when we do come to the US, most people come with that mindset, right? Like, it's not gonna work. People don't believe in advocacy. But, and that's part of our work, Luco. So telling people that, shifting that narrative, that mindset, that, hey, advocacy doesn't work often, or doesn't work at all in Congo, but it can work here. I can give you examples. So that's the first step. And that's why it's very important to highlight these examples, showing people that this has happened, it can happen if we can organize ourselves and take action. So our work is involved that. So making sure that people are aware of the power that they have. One thing that all politicians share, whether in Africa, Congo, here, is that they all want to be in power for the longest.
Right.
I think we've seen that here, the last election. And then so anything that threatens their power, they will pay attention. That threatens their ability to be kept in their position, they will pay attention to it. And what I'm referring to here is our power. Our power as people, and I'm glad that this group includes so many Congolese Americans, so many US citizens that can vote, is that, so when you have that power to remove them from their position, they will pay attention to you. And that's what we have been working to really change the mindset and making people realize that, and then how they can use that power to take action. But, at the end of the day, we have to take action, because if we don't take action, then, other people will take action, and then, our priorities will always be at the bottom of the policy, the decision makers, because they deal with so many situations, they deal with so many problems. If we don't raise our opinions, we don't raise our concerns, we'll be at the bottom of the list. So as far as local advocacy, that's also very important. And I'll also give you an example. In the summer, we were able to get with the DC mayor here in DC a Congolese American Day proclamation. So June 30th being recognized in the DC as Congolese American Day. I mean, this is to show that, hey, if we come together, we can take action, we can, move policies forward. But, at the local level, our biggest really action is to make sure that people are connected to their representatives, to the elected representatives, and Luco, Laura, you've worked there, you've worked with government officials. I think when you go, especially in districts, in states where there's so many Congolese people, we have a big Congolese population. Talk about Texas, and even here in the DMV, Charlotte, it really pains me when you go to talk to elected officials from those states, and they tell you that we don't hear from Congolese people, we don't hear from Congolese Americans. At the same time, they're hearing from Ethiopians, our Ethiopian brothers and sisters. They're hearing from our Sudanese brothers and sisters. They're hearing from the Liberian brothers and sisters. No wonder Liberian community can get the legislation passed, right? Talking about Ulrich. And us, unfortunately, we are not on the table. So, it's work in progress, and I think, and this is really, I'm not sure if this is a speech, but what I intended to do today is a call to action. These are really questions that we have to answer, and then these are things that we need collectively to take action on. Thank you.
So one thing that we all share on this panel is public sector service experience in some shape or form whether it's been directly working for public service entities or working for entities that do serve and work alongside the public sector. So Muyisa, in your professional role, outside of all the work that you've been doing to amplify Congo through your content creation, you help public institutions communicate and serve communities more effectively. How does this experience shape your perspective on diaspora advocacy and its influence on the public's perception of Congo?
Yeah. So my role now is really taking complex legislation in California and breaking it down into bite-sized pieces for the public to be able to consume. There's a tendency to look at something as a whole picture, and it can be very overwhelming for people. So having worked side by side with cities to say, okay, this law has come down the pipeline, how are we going to make this accessible to the public? How are we going to communicate the changes that are going to happen? How do we get the buy-in from the public? And so that's really how I've approached the issues in Congo as well. It's taking a situation that is wildly complex, decades long, and in several different languages, right, to a generation of people who maybe are turned off to the idea of getting involved in Congo affairs or Congolese politics or business, whatever it may be. And so I've really seen the need being on social media, seeing people that are in my demographic and even younger who, you know, you have their attention for a good minute, 2 minutes. How do you get them? You have to make sure that you're breaking it down to their level and you're able to have those mini calls to action or that trigger for them to really want to dig deeper. My role, I couldn't do what I do without the two people on this panel here. They're doing the research, they're out there doing the actual work. I'm just connecting people to them. I'm making sure that people have that resource. And so that's how I've really transitioned my public sector experience into my advocacy for Congo. It's just breaking it down into a way that's digestible for people.
Okay, so I have just a few more questions for the panel, and then we're going to open it up to the floor. So this last round, these are going to be kind of fast round questions. So I know we have a lot that we want to cover, but for this last set that I have for you all, we're going to try and do more of like a lightning round, and then I'll open up the floor to the rest of the folks who have questions for you. So I'm going to kick it back to Bibi. Ilaka is a very important initiative in terms of being able to raise awareness on what's been happening with maternal health in Congo. And just really quickly, can you talk to us about how your initiative and other grassroots initiatives like that can help shape the broader narrative and broader conversation around maternal health and allow people to see that maternal health isn't just about, you know, political, it's not just economic, but it's a matter of also justice. I know that's a lot, but we'll be quick.
I'll try. So with my work with Ilaka and also working with other women's organizations such as the Synergie des Femmes, what we come to understand is that those grassroots organizations, they help insert, you know, into like abstract geopolitic conversation more realistic. Like it adds a reality aspect to it because you're able to insert on the ground expert of lived experience, and then it helps us really articulate that, you know, maternal health mortality is linked directly to political violence, and like when you're advocating for global justice, they're intimately linked, right? I'm trying to make it fast. And then, so those, you know, they're just one issues, right? In the Congolese context, where the woman's body has been used as a weapon of war, it's not just the woman's body that's scarred, right? It's a tool that destroys community psychologically. It helps spike the rates of HIV. It creates a generation of orphans, which ultimately make them public health issues of emergency. And I can even go back to the 2018-2020 Ebola outbreak in Ituri, Beni, where health health workers were being targeted by rebel groups, which was basically avoiding communities that needed that support of getting, like, I remember at some point there was like not even like water, which is like essential to combat these kind of issues, and which with Ebola, which being a global threat because of the borders and how it can trouble. So I say that to say that maternal health or not is not a woman's issue, right? It's a lens that helps expose systemic failures in governance. So therefore, when we're talking about maternal health, public health, maternal mortality, it's really linked. Like the world has to see it as one with governance, political violence, so it has to be considered together, right? Thank you.
Thank you for that. I know I threw a lot at you to try and answer really quickly. So Muyisa, one of the things that we often talk about is our upbringing as millennials, and you as a Zillennial content creator, you brought Congo into viral conversations like, does Lingala contain the letter R? We'll talk about that one later. If you can find a Lingala word that starts with the letter R, think about it, and we'll talk about it later. But you've also used your platform on TikTok and social media in order to amplify the country's history and its politics to new audiences. So what makes digital storytelling such a powerful tool for diaspora advocacy today?
Freedom of thought. I think so much of what we saw before was curated. We got such beautifully packaged pictures and images of what Congo was, and sometimes it wasn't a beautiful package that we were being sold. And so the beauty of social media, the beauty of the storytelling that we get from TikTok, from Instagram, from X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, is that you're getting firsthand accounts from people, and that's powerful. You cannot see a video of a woman who's struggling with her maternal health. There's a really great page, oh man, I can't think of the name, but they highlight women in Goma, women in Bukavu who are suffering from the things that, you know, we hear about, but it's different to hear about it than it is to see it, to actually feel the emotion in their voice when they're speaking. And so I think the introduction of social media and digital storytelling has just amplified the voices, and it's allowed the rest of the world to be brought into the fold on what's happening in Congo. And I think now, especially given what had happened in January and what's still happening, we're at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, and it's given us a way to not leave the scene. So I think that's how I would say digital storytelling.
Thank you for that. And Nils, so looking forward, how can diaspora leaders like yourself ensure that community-based advocacy remains connected to the lived experiences of Congolese immigrants, both newly arrived and folks who have been here for a while still influencing both national and local policy?
Thank you, Lugo. So I'll say three things. One, consistency. And that's just a basic thing. If you go to the gym, you know that for you to see results, you have to be consistent. So we need to be consistent in our advocacy work, right? And you've seen how the situation, we had a big escalation in January, and which took all of our attention. But are we as active as we were in January? Or, you know, it's easy to activate people when there's an escalation, but after that, that moment of escalation, then, you know, our attention tends to shift away. So at Action for Congo and DRC Diaspora Desk, and I have so much appreciation for my colleagues here, Jess, Jim, and Bibi, we went out to implement that consistency. We have taken upon ourselves to meet every week. Every week we have our meetings to discuss our advocacy work and our progress. So it's very important that that we remain consistent in our work, in our advocacy work to see results. Number two, active participation, right? So I mean, you know, I don't think that with advocacy, we don't need a leader. We all do. I mean, it's basic things that everyone can do. And so with active participation, I think the previous panel, the panelists referred to protest, right? How Congolese Americans or Congolese people just, show up at protests, at public demonstrations. So with our work, Action for Congo, DRC Diaspora Desk, and I mentioned that earlier, we are connecting community members to the elected representatives. And that's why very often we will have meetings, virtual meetings with the representatives. So we're trying to minimize any excuses you might have. And lastly, I'll relate back to what Bibi said, knowledge. If you want to be effective advocate, we need to have the knowledge, right? And I always tell people, being from Congo doesn't make you an expert in Congo. There's so many things about Congo that I learned here in the US and I never knew about Congo. So, and the way we address that is in our weekly meetings, Wednesday 7 p.m., and I invite you all to join, we bring in experts to talk to us about the situation in Congo, so that when we have those conversations with members of Congo as elected representatives, we can be informed. We have, so our opinions and our arguments are informed, again, by fact, because we are in this new era of social media, misinformation, disinformation can spread very quickly. So those are the three main components of our work that we are focused on. So consistency, public participation, and then education, knowledge. Thank you.
So I just have one closing question for you all before I open it up to all of the attendees that are here. So without us sounding too much like the tontines and the tontons, what is one word of advice that you would give from all of y'all's experience in your various advocacy and kind of professional backgrounds? What's one word of advice that you would give to the Congolese Gen Z diaspora? And then in terms of like your hope for Congo and how they can advocate effectively or more effectively, not just to us who are now the elders, but amongst the rest of the community.
One advice, one word?
Or one advice, like one sentence, sorry. One word of advice.
I'm kidding. So one advice, I'm like, for the Gen Z, I think they have a powerful tool within their hand. They understand the algorithm of social media, and they have been working at the intersection of Congo and climate justice, or even like the global anti-racism. I encourage them to tap into the wealth of knowledge that the OGs know, the history, the people that have done it when social media wasn't there. They hold a lot of knowledge with them. So for me, it was very insightful to listen to Mvema yesterday, and I think it's testimonies and stories that we can take and incorporate into the Gen Z's advocacy online and turn them into powerful storytelling that are rooted in like the source of truth and the lived experience of the ones that have been doing it before we were even born. That's one of my advice. Yeah.
I think for me, it's getting involved. I believe each generation has their mission. Lumumba generation has their mission. Our parents' generation, they had their mission dealing with Mobutu, right? So what is are we meeting the challenges of our generation? Like, regardless, Gen Z, millennials, we have this, we have to meet the challenges, and we have to pursue the mission of our generation. When I started reading Congo history, I'll go to my dad and I'll tell him, hey, I see that in 1992 there was big protest in Kinshasa. Where were you? What did you do? So, in 10 or 20 years, when our kids will be reading history, they will probably be asking us the same question. There was a protest in DC in 2025. Where were you then? And I don't want to tell you my dad's response.
Go over to
For me, I'd say shift your mindset and re-inject positivity into it. I think we are very, we've been beaten down a lot as a community, and there tends to be fatigue with the continuous battle that we have. But yesterday is not today. Things can still change. As we heard on the panel, activism works. It's a slow process. It might not work in Congo, but it works elsewhere. So re-inject that positivity into your mindset when you're looking at issues and things in Congo. Be solutions oriented, right? Don't always look at it from the stance of the problem or the negative, or that we're in the losing perspective. What if we were in the winning perspective? If you approach your advocacy, or if you approach your daily life with that positivity, the chances of you succeeding are higher than if you already think you're going to lose or not succeed going into it. So just re-inject positivity.
And so I didn't want to embarrass us in front of any of the Gen Alphas who maybe might stumble across this, so I will not ask us to do a TikTok.
Gen Alpha.
Gen Alpha. Why not? So they are the babies. I mean, there's, what is the age range? Gen Z, I think, ends at 2012. It's like 2012 to 2025.
They're like 11 and under right now.
Yeah, so they're all the ones that are calling you unc or bro if you have kids at home, or saying all the different things that I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I didn't know I was a bro, but we will not do a TikTok and embarrass ourselves. But for those of us who are here and who are from a different time, perhaps you were using a cell phone or calling people on the landline, I also do recommend getting onto some of these social media platforms, because it is important for us to kind of see what the conversation is looking like and how it's moving forward. With that, I'm going to open it up to the audience. If folks have questions, we have about 15 minutes to ask some questions before we open it up for lunch.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Ganyangambi, founder of African Diaspora Connection, also Congolese. Thank you all so much for the work that you're doing. This is beyond inspiring. This is my first year actually connecting with the brilliant, people in my community doing incredible work. And so obviously we've been seeing the importance of controlling our narrative, and thank you for disseminating in a more practical and easy to digest way. Thank you for your engagement with congressional members and helping us understand the importance of connecting with representatives. Thank you so much for your maternal health work. I mean, obviously we know this work is devastating our women in our country, and thank you so much for organizing this incredible conference. So because we were talking about data, right? A lot of us, we have to be realistic. A lot of people, obviously we talked about lack of engagement, are very much, they don't know how to act. They don't know how to even begin. So that's what we talked about, the importance of having some kind of data access, right? Of, okay, we want to invest in Congo. How much, where do we even begin? What is the percent, how much land is there available? Who do we contact? Because we don't have also, trust in the people, right? So I'm just thinking of ways of improving, in your perspective, the work that you're doing. And how do we improve how we are getting buy-in from the community? I know we're doing the work, but have we thought about different strategies that you'd like to explore in the future? I know we're worrying about immigration, so people are like, I can't even think about this right now. I gotta worry about if I'm gonna get kicked out, or like you said, we have 1 minute, these Gen Zs, not Gen Zs, but people in general have attention spans that are, So I'm just trying to think how do we improve the work that we're already doing? What do you envision the evolution of the work that you're doing? Sorry, that was a lot to throw, but that's one of my questions.
Thank you. So just to summarize, how do they envision the work that they're doing moving it forward?
Yeah,
okay. The evolution. Do you have a specific person that you want to answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. You don't want to go?
You want to start?
You can go.
So I think meeting people where they are, right? I think we all can agree to some extent that Congolese people, we enjoy good food, we enjoy good music, we enjoy l'ambiance. and you know, and if those are the things that truly attract the majority of our community, then let's go meet them there, right? Exactly. I've gone and talked about advocacy at random social gatherings. Like, okay, if that's, you know, where we need to go to get people involved and to spread the word and, you know, to do our work, I'll go there. And then so meeting people where they are, but also understanding that this work is volunteer work, right? Maybe unlike the previous panel, you know, this is not, maybe for some people it might be business, but for like my colleague with Action for Congo and DRC Diaspora Desk, it's just a team of professionals that are willing to do volunteer work for the country. So it's something that takes time away from our families, other obligations. So we also have to be patient with ourselves, right? But also sustainability, right? And that's something that we don't talk often in our advocacy work. How can we make this sustainable? And that's why we're talking about future generations taking over and getting involved in this work, because this is how we can make this sustainable. So those are the things that we need to consider to really get our community involved, building sustainability, and making sure that you know, the momentum and the foundation that we are building now, that it will not vanish after a few years. So thank you.
Let's take your question over here.
Thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Rebecca. My question is twofold. I think you touched on it for the most part, but I think I just want to get your commentary on just tangible approaches to some concerns that I've noticed in my generation, so like Gen Z, mid-20s and younger. And the one is, as it pertains to advocacy, I noticed that it can risk being very surface level. Sometimes because of the lack of actual knowledge and education on what's actually going on in the country, not just as it pertains to current affairs, but even just the history. So you'll have young people on social media who will have the Congolese flag in their bio and the hashtag, and they're reposting images and just very generic rhetoric. And it feels like there's a lot of noise being made, not a lot of actual informing going on. And then when you actually approach them to try and have a discussion, they'll admit that they aren't actually all very conscious of you know, what's actually happening on the ground. And then the second question I have as well is something that I've observed in my generation and younger, is that there are young people growing up in the diaspora who are growing up in privilege. So, you know, like, I know for myself, so my parents and older siblings grew up in Congo, and they had lived experiences of the conflict there. I was privileged to grow up in South Africa, so I didn't have any of that experience myself. But you have young people who are growing up in the diaspora, so in the Americas, in Europe, South Africa, who have already adopted this defeatist mentality when it comes to speaking about the Congo, which I find so bizarre, because I'm like, we actually have access to like platform and privilege and avenues to affect change. But before we've even gotten a chance to have a conversation going, it's already like just like a throwaway discussion, like, oh, well, you know, what can we do? So it's like,
Okay, so just to clarify, this question I believe is from Lisa, and it's talking about the next generation that you're seeing on social media and being able to provide how you can help provide more clarity in terms of as they're engaging with content and becoming more aware of what's actually happening, and then also defeating the defeatist attitude or some of the perceptions that have been portrayed with the next gen.
Those two problems are very much interlinked, right? The fake wokeness comes because they are defeated, they don't actually understand the problem. So the solution to that is for the experts here to find a way to disseminate that information to them, whether it's giving that content to people like me, people like Congo America, Friends of Congo, Congo to Global is what I'm thinking of. Those big pages, getting that information to them in a way that is digestible for them. So instead of them posting images or pictures that are just blank and empty and they don't actually understand the problem, you break it down and you make the content enjoyable for them to consume and share. I'm sure you've seen the format with US politics, right? Where it's like two people talking to each other and they're talking in sort of a very exaggerated way, but you're then starting to understand the problem, right? You might have a video where it's a Democrat talking to a Republican and they're pointing out the hypocrisies or the blatant inconsistencies in their narratives. But things like that can help a lot to just help them understand. So I think if we're able to give them that information, then there's less of a feeling of defeat. I also would love to see from our government a resource, right? In the United States, for example, I can go to a .gov website and get all the information that I need about what is the Department of Treasury doing, what is the Department of this doing, what are we doing in this aspect. Congo has some of those things, but it's not always maintained. You're not really sure how to verify the information. And then there's also the issue of language. I mean, now with AI, they can translate it themselves, but you know, sometimes it's taking that extra step. Someone has to be really willing to do that. So providing those things to them. I started a series where we were just going through the Constitution, the Congolese Constitution. We're just on live and we're reading it. You know, you get so many comments and people saying, well, this is going on and they didn't follow the rules. It's okay, but what are the rules? Let's go look at it. What does the article say? Let's break it down. Talking about the mineral problem, for example. I had discussions, and I made it funny, right? Where I was just like, okay, show me where the mines are in Rwanda, right? And you have people come on, both Congolese and people from all over Africa, even Americans, are like, oh, they're the number one, of this mineral. And you're like, okay, well, where are the mines? Like, can you point it to me on the map? And the more that you do that, people start to understand, oh, wait a minute, I've been sold a narrative. They are the biggest exporter of minerals, but they don't have the mines. And if they do have the mines, they're not mines that are producing. And so when you break it down and help them see it and be able to teach it to somebody else, you can kind of fight that battle.
So we have time for one more question. If someone has a question for Bibi, I'm going to prioritize that. But do you mind me handing the mic down? Actually, I just wanted to say one thing. Yeah, so we're going to take one more question, preferably for Bibi. We're going to open it up to lunch, and then you all will have all the time to network with each other and ask all the panelists extended questions. But one thing that I wanted to say, the takeaway that I took from here is you need to partner with young people. I know that culturally speaking, we kind of get to this position after like 25, you're like, I'm old, you're not old. After 35, you're still not old. After 40, you're still not old. So please make sure that you're engaging with young people. And your question, we'll take.
Hello, Christian. So my question, actually, maybe you can respond to that, but it's to everybody. The future approach to Congo advocacy, what I want to highlight is like, for the Congolese community, we have a lot of movement of advocacy, which gives the impression of scattered effort, and looks like we have groups that are competing each other, which makes us losing the message. So for me, I would like to know what is the way of advocacy people to work together. I will just take an example we had in history. It's like the independence of Ireland. The independence of Ireland against the British is all the Irish who immigrated to the United States. In all the 50 states, they united and started sending money, and at that time they ended up having even senators who were elected, and it put pressure on England. And we're not talking about England of World War II. England before World War I was the strongest empire, and the Irish got independence just because of the unity of all movement of Irish in the US. So for us Congolese, what are the effort made to unite all the movements to launch the message?
Thank you. So, it's like a multi-layered response. So one thing is you do have Nils here that has Action for Congo, which is really a coalition of U.S. Advocate, which Friends of the Congo is also part of. So that's a great partnership where we're all coming together and we're able to collaborate, and it's really open to anyone is invited to join. I think where the disconnect sometimes happen is that people may have efforts, but we need to have alignment, and we don't always have alignments, which creates a struggle for us to collaborate, as a unit. But I would say that, I've been able to partner with advocates in the UK, in South Africa, in Kenya, in Tanzania, and kind of align with them. And like I was saying, we also do work with a lot of grassroots organizations in Congo directly, where we are able to learn from them and the situation on the ground, and kind of, incorporated it into the work that we're doing here to do our advocacy. But the main challenge, like I must admit, like when you're talking about other countries, there's a huge disconnect with the Congolese government, right? They don't see us as allies. They have their own agenda. They have their own things that they're doing. So it's really hard to coordinate efforts with them to move forward. And that bridge, I don't know how it's going to, how we're going to close that bridge. We were talking about that yesterday, but I think as a diaspora and communities, there are efforts that are being made for us to be better collaborators together. But as for the government, I don't have an answer for you, but maybe I can pass it to Nils since he has Action for Congo.
That's a very important question, unity. I think we can find common goals or grounds or things that we can work on, right? So we might disagree about what the Congolese government is doing. Well, fair enough. We might disagree about what President Trump is doing for Congo. We might disagree on, minerals still helping the Congolese people. But can we at least agree on women being used as a weapon of war? Can we agree on that? And can we agree on the fact that people who commit those atrocities need to be held accountable? Can we agree on that? I mean, that's just basic, right? And then if we agree on that, then how can we work together on that particular goal, right? We can agree, there's a term, agree to disagree, right? So we can leave our differences aside, and if you want to do your advocacy on something that we do not agree, that's fine. But on the victims, on the Congolese victims that need justice, can that policy item bring us together so we can do something? And that's how I've approached unity. And you will find my colleagues here with Action for Congo DRC Diaspora that's working with other groups on those goals. And then that's how you build unity, because it's virtually impossible, even with the Irish or the Jewish people who are here in the diaspora, it's virtually impossible to have everybody agree on the policy items. But if we can choose few items we agree on, and then let's commit to that, and I think that can help us create unity.
Mm-hmm.